Hi everyone. I don't know if it is working and if I'm live actually. Uh, can anyone just write in the chat to make sure that you copy before I start my presentation? Is there anyone? Okay, perfect. So today I'll talk about playtest, but more specifically, what is playtest, how it can be useful for you, and some tips to organize your own playtest. So let me introduce myself. I am Alex Pastor. I have a master's degree in cognitive science. I started at Ubisoft as a user researcher, and then I joined a few years ago the team of Plain Lab as a playtest coordinator. So most of the time when I meet some people from the industry, developers, they tell me I have a new game concept, and they start talking about this concept. They told me that this concept is innovative, it's massive, and it's 3 times funnier than everything else in the market. And then they present me the game, the prototype, and it looks something like this. So I asked them, yeah, okay, but what about the usability of your game? And it can appear that it's pretty much painful for the user to use, even though your game looks really nice on the description. That's why you need playtest. What does playtest mean, literally? So basically, it's bringing your gaming experiences and their players face to face. And most of the time, the developers imagine that it will be something like that. Players will love the game and it will be amazing. But in reality, it's more something like, oh, they don't use the game as I was planning them to use. So to make a playtest, you have to create a scenario where your product, that is your game, is manipulated by a representative users to identify potential problems. What can you playtest on your game? Everything, absolutely everything. So I made a little list down here, but this is just a sample. You can basically try and test everything, every part of your game. There's no limit. Concretely, what it will bring to you to do some playtest. First of all, it will improve the experience of your future players. If you don't manage to hook your players within the first hour or even sometimes few minutes, it's really hard to keep them more. And actually, that's your plan, is to make them play the full game. So to make sure that they will like at least the beginning of your game, you should play test it. It will also generate some materials that will help you to fuel your discussion within the team. It will give you a natural view on your product and help you seeing the big picture, so you can actually stop hiding yourself. It will also help you to pilot some choices. If you hesitate between two options, you can go for asking the opinion on users, and most of the time it will appear that one of your options was a dead end, and you should actually go for the other one, which will avoid you a lot of trouble. But the playtest is also a political tool in case of conflict within the team. But it can also help you for fundraising, to convince the people that will give you the money that you will use this money in a good way. But it can also be used on the other way around, as if you borrow some money to a studio and you want to control the quality of the game they're making with your money. Playtest is a way for you to make sure that they're not wasting your money. So it will mediate between the studio and the editor. I'll give you some tips about how to organize your playtest and some common mistakes to avoid. So when should you integrate your users during the process? Basically, all the time. You can integrate users as soon as you have the first idea of the game until the launch and even after. Uh, the concept is to have the users at every step of every stage of your development. I'll give you some methodologies that you can use depending which phase of the project you are. This is not, of course, exhaustive list. There are many more methodologies, but it's just a sample of the most common ones. So during the pre-production phase, you can use the focus group. Basically, you will take some users of other games that are really similar than yours, and you make them meet and talk about what they like in those kind of games. So you can then pitch your own game and see how they react about it. And in case they like or don't like some of your propositions, you know that you don't have to start developing the game this way. You can also, during the pre-production phase, use a methodology that is called the wizard of Oz. So the concept is if you can build or create any kind of cardboard about the game without starting developing anything, you can actually test some features of the game and see if it works and where could be the problems that your future user may encounter. During the production phase, you can actually make people play your game for a few times. Then you can make some individual or group observations. And while after they played, you can propose them to answer surveys or even process to some interviews with them to gather maximum information about what they think about the game. Um, During the production phase, you can also use for some kind of games. It's great actually for the games that require a low cognitive load. It's called the Think Aloud, and basically you will ask your user to describe everything he's doing and why. So in case the game is requiring too much cognitive load, then you can't do these kind of things because the user has to be focused on the game. But it's really great, for example, for turn-based games where the user is actually thinking about his next move and can share it about with you, so you can actually follow what he is doing and why. On the other hand, if you have a game that is more action or with higher cognitive load, the user won't be able to talk at the same time. So you can use the self-confrontation methodology. You have to record the session while the user is playing, and in the end, you can actually show him some shots of what he was doing and ask him why he did this to see if actually there was a reason behind the behavior. I'll give you some common mistakes to avoid if it's the first time that you're doing some playtest. The same, this is not exhaustive list. This is just the most common one. But if you avoid them, it's already something. The first one is to use the wrong target audience. Most of the time, it's pretty hard to recruit your target audience. So some people consider that it's fine to actually ask their friends, family, or even some other people from the video game industry. It's not. It's better than nothing for sure, but actually those people will never be honest with you, and they will try to make sure that you continue your game even though it's not really going in a good direction. They will never stop you. The second one is to add some biases. For example, when you do your playtest during events, which technically is not really playtest, uh, because you can't really control every variable. But during events, people are coming to see maximum of game and booth. So they will spend a few minutes playing your game, and then when you will start asking them what they think about it, they will tell you everything is perfect, so they can run to the next booth and make sure that they play maximum of game during the day. So you won't have a lot of feedbacks, and when you will have, there will be mainly short because people don't want to waste too much time. Another common bias is to jump on the conclusions when you do your playtest. If you are convinced that there is a problem with one of the feature, as soon as one feedback will go this way, you will say, "Oh, I knew it, and I have to change it." But you will not really look if any other comments were going the other way around because you were actually convinced before the test that this feature will create some problems. The third common mistake is to be greedy when you do your playtest. You want to make sure everything is in your game, so you wait, and then at a point you're making a huge playtest and you want feedbacks on everything. The problem of having feedback on everything is that technically you're losing a lot of precious information on some features that were really critical for you. Um, the last one is about schedule. So starting doing playtest too late in the production or doing only one big playtest, actually any if you have feedbacks on any feature that is critical, like the controls, for example, and you do this playtest at the end of the production, it's too late for you to change the whole concept of the game. So make sure that each feature is tested uh, at each step of development, so you can actually validate them and make sure you can continue. And the last one is to do some playtests to close one from another. You know your production team, and if you start doing playtests all the time, you will have too much data to treat, and you will not be able to make the changes in the game before the next playtest. So you actually lose some potential users. Um, so it's important to make sure you will be able to develop and correct the problems before going for the next playtest. Uh, in one sentence, the perfect situation will be to have dedicated budget from the beginning, so you can test the game regularly as soon as possible on your target audience in a neutral environment with small but precise goals, and of course, be objective when you analyze the feedback. So this is basically the perfect situation for doing a playtest. I'll give you some information about how to create your scenario or your protocol when you create when you want to do a playtest. So the first step is to find and determine your goal or goals if you have few of them. And depending on those goals, you will select the best methodology depending also on the type of product you want to sell and the phase of the project. You have to write everything down on a protocol with the timings, and each step of this playtest. Why? Because actually this protocol is the structure of your scientific experiment. If you change any variable as the time of playing or the time of any step or even a version of the game, anything between two layers, then the experience will be different, and then you can't really consider that this is the same playtest. So beware to make sure you can control everything when you're doing playtest. When you are with the playtester, it's really important that you make them feel comfortable. The experimentation is based on your product. it's not based on the users and their ability to play. You shouldn't tell them too much, because you can actually spoil them on some element of the game you would like them to discover, and they can go on some problems you didn't plan or you didn't expect to find. Don't lead too much. Those if you try to control too much what's going on and you give them too much information, then you actually may lose part of the problems they find and not ask them in the end. So then you lose the feedback. You never argue with your users when they're in the playtest, because they're never wrong. Anything they will understand is because your game is explaining this way. So it's never the fault of the user, it's always the fault of the way you try to express your information through the game. And the last one, of course, the most important, is take notes on everything that is going on, what you can observe, but also what the user will say or how they will react. Every little information is really important, so you can know what actually the user is thinking about the game at this moment of the development. So congratulations, you just did your first playtest. Everything went perfectly. Now you have to analyze the feedback you gathered, find the problems, the source of the problem, select the best solution with your team, implement in the game, and you go back to the playtest, because the fact that you find a solution with your team doesn't mean that it will fully correct the problem, or it can even create another one. So it's really important that when you patch the game, you go back to the test session so you can validate your changes and move to the next problem. Thank you for listening to me today. So just a little reminder, do not skip playtest if you're planning to sell your game one day. I'm available right now if you have some questions about Little Talk. So you can write to me in the chat if you have any questions. Was it clear at least? Yes. If you want to turn on your microphone, you can actually talk, I think. I don't know if you have a microphone. So for what kind of game playtest is suitable the most? All the games. I never heard about a game that doesn't suit to any playtest. As soon as you want to sell any product, actually, you you have to make sure that the future users will use the product as you wish them to use it. So it's really important that at least several times during the production, you make sure that buyers are trying the object. It can be, of course, a game, but it can also be like just an experience. And it's the same process. Like make sure that it doesn't create any problem, and also have some feedbacks about how people like it, so you have a better opinion on if you manage to sell your product. Is there a time to start testing the game too late? Yes, if you can't modify on time, for example, if you have to release the game, doing it 2 months before the end, it's actually too late, because if you have a feedback on basic element, I mean, let's consider that it was the first playtest. It's really, really too late. In case you made playtest all along the development, I would say that too late is just the moment where the code is locked. In the game, there is no point making a playtest. But then after your game is on, if you have, for example, online game where you can actually make some update on the time, you can still continue to do some playtest or take a sample of your users and try to gather some information about the game live. So you can actually correct problems live by the following. How playtest can help in testing online games. Um, the same. So if you have a game that is online, it's important that from time to time you try to find a sample of players that never played the game, because your users that play your online game for long, they get used to a lot of elements, even though it was not perfect for them, but they get along with. But if there is a newcomer on your game and nothing is made for him, there's no tutorial or it's really hard to understand, then it might quit the game after a few hours or even minutes because it doesn't feel welcome. So it's important from time to time that you just throw a little sample of new users and you gather their feedbacks about how they feel, will they be able to play long, um, yeah, so basically it's just to make sure that your community, when you have an online game, is not slowly dying, and you can renew the players because the newcomers are welcome. Do you have any more questions? I have 5 minutes more for you. Otherwise, you can actually, of course, write to me, and I will stay available. If you have any question, I can answer emails or even contact me to the website. Welcome. Okay. So if nobody has any more questions, I don't know if I should keep the session open longer or. Thank you. Thanks to you for welcoming me, and also all of you for your time listening to me. It was really nice. Okay, perfect. You're welcome. It was a pleasure to come. I hope it was helpful and that might help anyhow. In case, just write to me or to anyone in the team, and we'll be really, really happy to answer you. So just just contact us in case you need anything, and it'll make a pleasure to answer your email. Okay, I'll cut the session if it's fine for everybody. And so thank you for listening to me.